Alright, howdy ho folks. Multiversal Medium here for another episode of Harvestella. Last time we left off, I don't know, probably complaining about Final Fantasy. Yeah, that's about right. I think I was complaining about the writing in the series. This episode, I guess I'll maybe, just maybe, have enough time to actually talk about the gameplay issues I see in the series. And we can keep that wonderful hate spite train going. Hecky to the yeah, I guess. Oh, this game is nothing but spite, I swear. I guess these ones are just like higher quality. Whatever. Whatever. Anybody. I guess we can go to the dungeon and actually play the game. And we could talk about gameplay and why I dislike Final Fantasy's gameplay usually. So, I've mentioned before, I do enjoy some of the Final Fantasy games. It's because of their gameplay. Why? Because across all of the games, they usually don't have the same gameplay. They usually just kind of do whatever gameplay wise, and they've never really etched out a niche for them gameplay wise, and it's astounding, honestly. Made sure at 7 need 150. Okay, and for the fighter one, I can grab step, start of a dash. Okay. Sure. And and let's keep mage going for now. Anyways, when it comes to Final Fantasy, like, gameplay mechanics, progression, all that stuff, it just changes from game to game. And I'm not beyond learning a new system. That's not actually the issue. I will learn and adapt to a new system. I think they make very unintuitive systems, which is an issue. And that's proven by the fact of their constant usage of just walls of text for tutorials. That has been used for decades at this point. That's what the heck Final Fantasy thinks a good tutorial and how to have a good system is. They think you should just read a wall of text to understand various mechanics that they introduced in one game, and spend basically 30 plus minutes learning those various mechanics just by reading. So, okay. Am I just using ice for whatever reason? That's weird. Ooh, you guys are just faster than me. That's not nice. Wait, does being a mage actually suck? That's about right. Get that down. Okay. So they'll just have like walls of text for tutorials and all that. Fine, I've dealt with that in other games, and if I want to learn, I will learn. Cool. But it goes beyond that. Apparently need bounds for that. It's the constant changing of battle systems and progression that ultimately change how the game feels. And when you're changing that every single time, it's... If I were to ask you, there's a new Final Fantasy coming out, what's it like? I don't think anyone would be able to give me a description unless they spent several hours either A, playing the game, or close to an hour looking up gameplay trailers or someone else who had played the game. There is no definite what the heck is Final Fantasy when it comes to gameplay. And I find that astounding, honestly. It's an IP that's been around for since the NES era, basically. And it has no brand identity. There is legit no brand identity in Final Fantasy. What is Final Fantasy at the end of the day? What does it equate to? It barely has a mascot. Like, I know chocobos or whatever, but that was introduced later, and it had goblins as starting enemies going on, and then they were like, yeah, let's have goblins as the main enemy type. And then they moved away from that and went with like weird mandrake things. They don't know what they're doing with the series, is what I'm saying. And it's a series that's existed for a majority of their company's existence, and they don't know what to do with it. I could argue that the constant changing of setting and just characters and stuff is annoying. But honestly, I don't consider it that. I've dealt with games doing that a lot. I don't expect a sequel in a series to honestly be all about the characters from the first one, or even the setting. And that's not an issue. If your game's good, I will immerse myself in it. I don't play Oblivion expecting all the info about the Nerevarine in Morrowind. And you're never going to Morrowind when you're playing Oblivion. It's whatever, who cares? No, not there. Actually, go back home. Yeah. But when the only thing that's a constant in your series, the only thing is the fact that your series A has chocobos and B has spell names and summon names that are this, what the heck is your series? What are you trying to sell? What am I supposed to expect when you announce it? What is Final Fantasy at the end of the day? Gameplay wise, Final Fantasy has zero identity. And some people will say like, yeah, it's a turn-based RPG. And it's like, well, even by turn-based RPG standards, they have like 15 different systems they bounce around with. None of those systems stay in the series. It's gotten to the point where like people who worked on like one or another Final Fantasy decided to stop making Final Fantasy and just out of stamina. Hold up. Let's see here. I'm certain I got something. Well, I even have more. So yeah, let's just munch on that. But like, what was the tangent I was just about to go on? Yeah, people have left working exactly on Final Fantasy to work on their own IPs still within Square Enix because they didn't want to make a different game. They wanted to make that game. That's what the Saga games are. Someone made Final Fantasy 2 and they're like, hey, why don't we just make this type of game from here on out? Well, that's not going to be Final Fantasy. Okay, I don't understand why that is the way it is, but okay. And then it just devolves from that. You have an entire IP. Heck, there are newer IPs coming out, or arguably are out, that are just earlier versions of Final Fantasy if they extrapolated on how that version of Final Fantasy worked. Bravely Default, I want to say, is either Final Fantasy 3 or Final Fantasy 5. From the base mechanics to its job system and everything, it is just one of those two games. I can't remember which. But like battle system, everything, it's just an extended version of those earlier versions of Final Fantasy. Quite literally, we are getting spin-offs of Final Fantasy technically that are just various versions of Final Fantasy they don't make anymore. And I don't comprehend why there's no brand identity for one of the quote-unquote best JRPGs in existence. Like, I have zero clue what to expect if I were to go into a store and ask for the newest Final Fantasy. with the exception that I would assume it would have horrible writing and horrible character designs. That's honestly all I'd expect from it. Probably decent music, actually. Yeah, I'd expect that too. And people might argue, well, like, I know there's some action RPG ones, but like, it's just turn-based or active time systems, basically. They all play the same, and it's like, no, they don't. Even if we're talking about when they switched to the whole active time turn-based thing, which is basically turn-based, but they have a bar that, like, fills up or whatever. They don't play the same. They have different progression systems. They introduce various aspects that just don't play the same. Someone I heard argued that like Final Fantasy XII is just a 3D representation of the turn-based AT system from the SNES, and it's like, no, it isn't. It's more of an MMO auto attack system where your skills are on cooldown. It plays different. It just is different. Freaking, if you were super into Final Fantasy IV or whatever, I wouldn't be able to recommend Final Fantasy X because they're just different. And that's every entry. If you told me you liked any single entry of Final Fantasy, I wouldn't be able to recommend any other entry of Final Fantasy. They're not the same. And it's all paired with like, oh gross, she's here. Look. But it's all paired with this weird aspect of every single one of them just weirdly sucks at being intuitive. I don't think a single Final Fantasy is just intuitive mechanics wise. You need a 30+ minute tutorial to understand mechanics in every single Final Fantasy. And even then, most people probably aren't going to comprehend it. I know people swear by Final Fantasy VII. You like the materia system, that's cool. How many of you, the people who like the materia system, understand how to draw magic and how that works and everything from Final Fantasy VIII? How many people actually are all about the sphere grid or whatever from Final Fantasy X? That's cool. That's never used again. You will never see a sphere grid again in the series. So if you like that, go find a different game. That's the long and short of it. Just find a different game that isn't Final Fantasy, because you will never see that again in Final Fantasy unless they just re-release Final Fantasy X again. That's what it amounts to. And sure, like it. Heck, you can like the entire series gameplay-wise, because something about each version of gameplay fits with you. But if I told you to play a mage in Final Fantasy I, most of you aren't going to comprehend the spell slot system because it's basically just D&D. So unless you know how spell slots work, you're not going to know. You're going to be like, where's the MP? Because that's what you'd think a turn-based RPG would be. They just keep doing that. And it's infuriating. Because there are things like Bravely Default, which just expanded on earlier battle systems. And they just refuse to keep a battle system. They refuse to keep a progression system. And it's astounding because it's the same company that does Dragon Quest, which has just extrapolated and grown on its battle system to make it slightly more complex. I'm certain some of you guys are thinking like, it is a freaking turn-based RPG. What the heck do you mean that it's like just not a good turn-based RPG, or they're changing how turn-based RPGs work for it? It's like there are a lot of different ways to do turn-based combat. There really are. Like, freaking everyone likes Persona 5 nowadays. So let's say the press turn system that SMT is mainly known for, even though they have other systems in various spin-offs. The press turn system is a turn-based combat system. You attack on your turn, the enemy attacks on their turn. But they went beyond that by saying, if you hit an enemy's weakness, you get an extra turn. Okay, I guess I do just need repair kits. Cool. That was a waste of time coming here. Whatever. Just whatever. I could complain about that. I forgot to make more repair kits. That's kind of on me, but I find it a bit odd that something that was introduced just earlier on this map is necessary to get all the way through the map. And to do that, I need to leave the dungeon. It's not the fact that the mechanic is necessary to progress further. That's how you learn mechanics. You teach it and you make them do it. But I need to stop being in a dungeon to progress in the dungeon on the same map that I was introduced to the mechanic on how to progress in the dungeon. So quite literally, they gave me that tutorial at the start of this area and didn't let me know, you need to leave now because you're not going to be able to make any progress. Just oy vey. Yeah, create it. Let's create 3. Sure, 3. Why not? Cool repair kits. I'm not. A box of various tools. Also contains strengthening lumber and stones. A must-have in every household. Okay, cool, sure, whatever. But yeah, there was nothing said during the tutorial or anything. You need to leave now. You cannot progress. Like, arguably, when introducing such a thing, there's nothing wrong with having the character do such. But it should also be let known, like, after doing it 3 times or whatever, I was like, I am out of repair kits. We're going to have to go back and make some at this point. It was simply just told, like, you can repair it, like, craft these at home. So I thought it was just going to lead to odds and ends sprout-wise on the map. Just, that's an offshoot of something different. Honestly, possibly my fuck up, but I still feel it was handled wrongly, but I have a bad taste in my mouth about this game, so maybe I'm biased. As I was talking about before that, because this is just Rage Tangent Central, I guess. The press turn system for SMT type games in Persona 5, you hit an enemy's weakness, you get an extra turn. All of your party hits an enemy weakness, now your entire party can attack again. That is an amazing way to very simply reinvent the turn-based battle structure of most games that do turn-based combat. It's very simple on paper, but it completely changes how the heck you handle combat. And it's nice. In the system, or in the game that was introduced, it demands you learn that system early on, because you're not going to be able to do stuff later. SMT games are known for reverse difficulty curves. They're difficult at the start while getting simpler as you go on. Why? Because at the start, which is usually when newer people are playing the game, it demands you learn how the game is played. Otherwise, you will not progress. That's why there's the Minotaur fight in SMT, what is it, 4? It's why there's the Matador fight in SMT 3. They demand you learn how to play the game. And I'm not against that. So with that in mind, compared to just what I'm certain most people consider turn-based combat, that is a showcase of what a different turn-based system would be. Now take that in mind and just say they introduced that in SMT 3. And then SMT 4, they did a different system. In SMT 5, they did another different system. And it's that same level of difference in turn-based combat, while just not staying true to what combat was across any of them. You find an unnatural pile of leaves at the edge of the road. Maybe someone's hiding something in there. And no. I'll come back and do all this stuff. I don't know. When we're almost done with this dungeon, I guess. Like right before the boss fight, I guess. But so with that in mind, that's just what Final Fantasy's been doing since like the get-go. And it's also paired with how they constantly change progression. Like, don't get me wrong. I like games with like class systems. I like games with skill trees and all that. And I know some of the games I like sometimes introduce them as well as don't have them in later entries. Dragon Quest does that. There's a handful of... Yeah, cool. Yeah, about that, there's treasure right there. And, like, not for nothing, but I want the treasure. I'm just saying. Any bot. We good? Yeah, I guess we good. Anyways. So, like, Dragon Quest does that. But the base mechanics of Dragon Quest battle system are the same, and they slowly introduce more mechanics as like the games go on. Like the tension system introduced in, I want to say, Dragon Quest VIII, which led to possibly stockpiling, not doing anything for a turn in order to do more damage or healing a different turn. It's a simple change, but it's something that arguably adds a bit more tactics to it. And they don't change the base formula while slowly building upon the foundations of the base formula. Dragon Quest has been doing that, and they've only changed how progression works here and there amongst the series. Final Fantasy changes the base formula of gameplay and the progression system every entry. It's infuriating. It's annoying. It's... Well, I think I said earlier in this episode, if you like a certain type of Final Fantasy game, you need to look elsewhere to get that kind of gameplay again. And that's what it amounted to. I like Final Fantasy XII's gameplay. I do. So what do I get to play instead of that? I get to play .hack and .hack GU, as well as Xenosaga and, it's Xenoblade, the Xenoblade series. That's what I get to play instead of Final Fantasy XII. Because Final Fantasy XIII is not going to play like Final Fantasy XII. And Final Fantasy X is not going to play like Final Fantasy XII. That's what I'd have to look for. And, I like... Feel free to hate this, because I know it's a bad game. I already talked, like, saying I dislike the writing of Final Fantasy. So, like, I'm not defending this game. It's a garbage game. But I like Final Fantasy X too. And the reason I like Final Fantasy X too is the battle system paired with the magical girl aspect. Why? Because I like magical girls and I like RPGs. And hey, we have technically a AAA dev magical girl RPG. Cool. That's awesome in my book. Actually very just fun and nice gameplay loop wise. The writing is absolute garbage and I cannot redeem it in any way, shape, or form. But the gameplay loop and the actual battle system is fine. I enjoy it. Let's see here. Toss all that. But if I wanted to play another game like Final Fantasy X 2, I'd have to dig up one of my, I don't know, 5 other magical girl RPGs. I'm just not going to get that again from Final Fantasy. Earns your money when it's shipped. That is fascinating. So you'd think in a game with crafting, you'd use fur to craft. No, fur is worthless. We don't have armor slots in this. We just sell fur. Okay. And just get rid of this stuff too, I guess. Whatever. What's the point? I'll grab more seeds here in a bit. Pyro liquid. Used to fortify weapons. Okay, sure. You know what I need to be using? Storage box. Oh, I just realized. You're seriously? There's no way to increase this number as far as I'm aware, higher than just holding right. Usually in UI like this, if I hit left once, well, at 1, it'd go to the max number. And that'd be nice. Usually in UI like this, if I hit up, it would increase by 10. And that'd be nice. But that's not what's happening. And that's not what's going to be going on in this, because they're not going to be smart about it. It is what it is. It is what it is. Hey, Faye. Is there a way to like... Okay, yeah, I can sort. At least they have sorting. I don't know. I honestly was expecting them not to. Anyways. Gosh, what was I talking about besides just getting magical girl stuff? Yeah, so if I wanted to play Final Fantasy X or a game like Final Fantasy X-2, basically, I would have to pick up a different game. And I don't think a long-lasting series should be that at the end of the day. I really don't. I feel like there should be some common denominator across the entire series that arguably makes it obvious that's what I'm getting into when I buy the series. And Final Fantasy lacks that. So now the only thing Final Fantasy has going for it, when it's a JRPG series, a video game genre known for good storytelling and everything, is a good soundtrack. And at that point, is it a good game series? It's obviously not a good RPG series in my mind. No decent story, no decent gameplay. And those two are some of the biggest things that you need to hit, in my opinion. I've mentioned I will overlook bad story for good gameplay. I will not do vice versa. I will not overlook bad gameplay for a good story. I really won't. I will utterly crap talk a great story game with horrible gameplay that's just annoying to deal with. So, yeah, I don't think Final Fantasy is good. That's the short of it. I will occasionally find an entry that I find enjoyable, but it will be irredeemable when it comes to anytime any character opens their mouth, because they will have dialogue like all the characters I was just dealing with in the earlier episodes of this. It will be irredeemable as I get further along and various plot points pop up, because there is a 90% chance that whatever horrible thing we're supposed to be fighting is actually just going to be forgotten about here in, like, I don't know, a few more hours. And, like, that's another freaking thing I didn't talk about. So, like, I'm not against having a villain built up and then that villain being changed at a later point for a different final boss. That's not actually the issue with the Deus Ex Machina boss whatever thing. It's how it's handled in every single Final Fantasy. It's how the fact that they refuse to do proper build-up and proper storytelling tools, they don't tell a good story. So in one of the Dragon Quests, and I'm going to avoid saying which, because it's spoiler stuff, and it's a lot of the series is great. You should probably play some of them at least. I don't know. Do you? I'm not going to force anything. But in one of the Dragon Quest series, you set out for vengeance against a horrible individual. And this horrible individual has been doing horrible things. And the horrible things they've been doing has gotten other party members over your journey to join you because they also seek vengeance against this horrible individual and what they've been doing. And it's what ties your party together, this seeking out vengeance for what's been done. And you finally meet up with this individual as they're mid-transformation into a horrid monster. It's horrific, it's grotesque, and you're going to stop them by any means necessary. And it's the entire point of the storyline up to that point. And I just said, up to that point, you beat them. And your party's like, oh gosh, what are you going to do? It was great spending time with you in the short moments here and there, but now that that dude's taken care of, I think I'm going to go back home. I think I need to tend the graves of the people I left behind, kind of thing. And it makes sense. That's proper characterization for them as a whole. It makes sense for them to just kind of disperse after everything's said and done. And then, as you all are kind of just starting to go on your way, the curtain's kind of raised about what's actually happening. Not fully. It shifts a bit, and you start to realize there's things going on behind the scenes. And now you're pulled into the actual plot of what the heck you had a hand in and you thought we're done with up until that point. So you spend the next portion of the game dealing with all the nonsense that was actually taking place. And I say nonsense like lovingly. But it's a proper build-up for the actual villain. The actual evil. The actual thing you need to be dealing with. And it's handled well because that point that you thought you were done, I want to say maybe be only a third of the way through the game. And it spends the rest of the game properly building up what you need to be dealing with and what was actually happening and how to try and stop it. It's not tacked on in the final dungeon. It's not just something forced in your face when you walk through the door of when you think you're going to the final boss fight and that dude's just there. It's properly built up. And it's amazing because you just don't see that in Final Fantasy. Not usually. I think Kefka kind of does that, actually. But the storyline for Final Fantasy VI is so over the place because they have like 15 different party members, but there's no real protagonist, so it's hard to have a central plot when quite literally the central plot is the overarching narrative of the villain. And they just have a bunch of people doing random things, and you'll do something on one character, and then it will just cut to a different character's thing they're doing. It's hard to keep concise storytelling going in that scenario. So there's some issues just storytelling-wise with Final Fantasy VI. But you don't really see that overarching issue and the actual villain having pulled some strings and then, oh, the curtain's been drawn and now you see them kind of thing in Final Fantasy. But you'll see that a lot in other decent stories with proper build-up and everything. And it's just infuriating. It honestly is. And it's... Honestly, I see some forum post about people saying like, hey, I'm new to RPGs. What should I play to get into like just the genre as the whole? What should I try? What should I try to dip my toes into? And a lot of people are nostalgic about things they liked when they were younger, not realizing they are not good entry points. And these people, like, the amount of times I see Final Fantasy VII suggested in this context is appalling. Because not a single individual suggesting it is taking a step back and questioning whether or not Final Fantasy VII is a good entry point into the genre. Because at the end of the day, it isn't. It really isn't. Although the plot is more concise than every other Final Fantasy, really, Final Fantasy is low-key known for having a convoluted, garbage plot that is impossible to understand. Because they didn't write a good plot. And Final Fantasy VII is just the most concise, understandable one, so people like it more. So people suggest it. But beyond just the bad plot that's going on there, they also have gameplay that is only explained via walls of text. It's a gameplay system and a progression system that is unintuitive, and the devs know it's unintuitive. That's why the tutorial in the game is the way it is. It's just not handled well. You can't pick up a game like Final Fantasy VII and just be expected to know how to play and progress in Final Fantasy VII if you've never played a turn-based RPG before and you don't know what those are. And that's the issue. Now, I don't think a single Final Fantasy game is intuitive. I don't think you can simply pick up and be like, hey, so I know you're new to the genre, try this. This is a really easy to learn, like, entry in the genre. Not a single one in the entire IP is new player friendly. Yet they're constantly suggested. It's annoying to see at the end of the day. That's the long and short of it. Oh well, it's been an episode, guys. I think I've gone enough on a tangent today. So we're probably going to call it here for this episode. If you guys want to listen in on more just rambling and incoherencies as I probably circle around the same subject for way too long, because it kind of feels like that's what I was doing, feel free to drop on by for another episode of Harvestella. But until then, ciao!